Welcome to this presentation of Bear Grads on leveraging ICPSR, Unveiling a Goldmine of Datasets for Graduate Research. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today. Lynette Hoelter is an archivist and director of instructional resources at ICPSR. She is involved in projects relating to data and research infrastructure in the arts and social sciences generally. Lynette is also passionate about data literacy and helping people understand the quantitative world around them. Welcome, Lynette.
Thank you very much. And I am happy to be here today with you. You will discover as I go through that I am not a very formal presenter. So if you have questions as they come up, I can't see you because for some reason my PowerPoint overtakes my Zoom. So I can't, which is also means I can't tell if you're falling asleep to do something to wake you up. But feel free to just shout out questions, or if you want to put them in the chat. And Nicole, if you could go ahead and ask them, that would be cool. You can ask them at the end if you want. You can ask them as we're going. Either way works. What I thought we would talk about today is who or what is ICPSR, just kind of a general brief introduction. And then we'll spend most of the time talking about finding and evaluating the data in ICPSR's catalog for particular research questions. And then I also wanted to make sure to let you know about the summer program in quantitative methods, as many graduate students are interested in that. And I'll just end with some ways to connect with ICPSR. So who is ICPSR? And I still haven't, I've been there for, oh gosh, probably, I can't do math in my head, 18 years now. And I still can't tell if we're a who or a what. So you can decide as we go. Most people know us from our website, which is at the top of these slides. And I should mention, I did share these slides with Nicole so that she can make them available. I put lots and lots of links and screenshots in the slides so that you don't have to try to catch them as we're going along. But the ICPSR website is right at the top of this slide. The homepage screenshot is there as well, but we actually have people behind that. We're an organization of about 150 people. This just is a picture of the people who happen to be there on a given day, a year ago winter, I think. We are one of the world's oldest and largest social science data archives, or social and behavioral sciences. We were founded in 1962, so we just finished celebrating our 60th anniversary. Thank goodness we don't have to do the tie-dye thing anymore. We have about just under 20,000 what we call studies, which is one or more data sets. And that's what we'll spend the bulk of today talking about. We also have information about what's in those data sets, and that information is searchable as well. And right now we've got just over 6.4 million variables in that social sciences variables database. And all of those things are related to over 100,000 publications. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of how those things intertwine as we go. We are a consortium, which means we're made up of member institutions. We currently have about 820 member institutions around the world. University of Northern Colorado is a member. So everything that I show you today is freely available to you. We also have lots of other resources that I'm not going to share today for helping with things like data management plans and grant writing, things like that. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of those, but I won't be talking about them directly. And most people know us either for our data or for the summer program. I love standing in the exhibit booth, and people will often see the summer program banner, and they'll come up and ask me like, hey, did you know that I met my spouse in the summer program? And I'll be like, I don't know who you are. So no, I did not know that. But lots and lots of people have been through it. I think their current count is about 25,000 people have been trained in the summer program. Before we start talking about the data that ICPSR has, I thought it would be useful to take a step back and make sure we're kind of on the same page about why you might want to use data like ICPSR's holdings and what exactly it is that we mean when we talk about data. So why would you want to use secondary data? I know a lot of graduate students think that they have to collect their own, do a survey or do observations on their own. It's actually really, really hard to do that kind of data collection, and especially to do it well. It takes a lot of time and money. So it's really resource intensive. If you can use something that somebody else has already put those resources into, it gives you a jump start. And there's a good chance that somebody has already collected the data that you want, or at least something that gets you close enough that you can go ahead and do the project that you're interested in. Also, existing data often provide larger samples. If you're doing a survey yourself, you may do it of maybe students on your campus. Maybe there's something in the ICPSR catalog that has a nationally representative sample or an oversample of a particular subgroup that you might be interested in. And often these studies are long kind of data collection efforts. They often use face-to-face interviews. So people can ask a lot more questions than you might be able to ask just on a given survey or an interview. So there's lots more people, lots more questions often in these secondary data sets. And it's also really, if you think about it, a good way of making the most use of the respondents' participation. They're participating because they want to be a part of science, and this allows that participation to go on beyond that first initial research project. And funders, particularly the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, require data sharing because they want people to make good use of the resources that they've already invested in collecting some of these data. And as I mentioned, it gives you a jump start. So you get to what I think of as the fun part much sooner. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion by what we mean by data. I often talk to students who come asking for data and find out what they really want is some sort of statistic, like a summary. And I think this is easier to see visually. So if you're looking just for a table or a graphic, something like that, that's statistics. What we have at ICPSR is the underlying data. So the part that looks like a really big, just a big spreadsheet. That's what we have. We have some of the statistics, but they're buried in the research that's tied to the data. They're not our bread and butter. I like to think about it as ICPSR does data so that you can do statistics. So what is it that you can get at ICPSR? I mentioned that we're a social and behavioral sciences data archive. We define that really, really broadly, and it continues to get broader all the time. We started as the Inter-university Consortium for Political Research, ICPR. They added the social somewhere in the mid-70s, I think 1975. Thankfully, they've stopped adding letters to our name because it's not pronounceable anyway. But we continue to add more and more kinds of data to our collections. So don't let the social and behavioral sciences, if you're in education, for example, that is still something that we very much cover, nursing as well. We've got data about individuals at all stages in the life course, everything from early childhood, like daycare kinds of settings. Actually, we have information from mothers before they've given birth about their prenatal care, things like that. And then we have an archive of data on the aging. So we've got the other end of the life spectrum as well. We have information about institutions like colleges or universities, libraries, art museums. We have data about events, and we even have some random data about animals, like if you want to know the heights of horses in the Habsburg Empire, you can click the link that says horses. And if you're in maybe criminal justice and you want to know what knife marks do or look like in pig cartilage, we have some of that as well. Our data cover a wide time period. The oldest data are from 1194 to 1294. They're about public executions. But most of our data are much more recent than that. I would say mid 1800s forward, and a lot of it is the late 1900s and the 2000s. I mentioned that we cover many disciplines. Sometimes we like to look at the disciplines associated with our account holders, so the people who create accounts to download data. And I think at last count, we cover something like 50 different disciplines. You'll find, again, that kind of sort of rectangular data file, the survey data or the administrative data. We're also incorporating more new data types, things that people are using now as data that they didn't in the past. So we have, for example, brain scan image data in the Archive of Data to Study Disability to enable policy. So we've got brain scans, we've got photographs. I believe the Arts and Culture Archive, which I direct, is getting photographs of graffiti or public art. So we're getting more and more image data, video data, other kinds of unstructured observation and interview kind of data. And we also just this fall launched, or I guess it was late summer, launched a social media data archive. So we've got data from Reddit and X and Meta, as well as some of the more traditional social science data. And again, I put a link to the social media data archive there as well. I include this slide just to show you a kind of a breadth of what people are downloading. This is the things that have been most commonly downloaded or most frequently downloaded since July 1st of last year. So I try to do it on a fiscal year basis. And I love watching this list change over time. Ad Health will always be our most commonly downloaded data set. It's huge. There's a lot in it. You can do all kinds of research. So it will always be at the top. But and Midas and India Human Development Survey often fight for the second and third spots. But underneath that, it changes depending on what is going on in society. So last year, there was lots and lots of stuff about same-sex relationships, transgender. You can see the transgender survey just made the cut this year. So I love watching these change in reaction to what's going on. During the pandemic, as you might imagine, there were other things going on with George Floyd. And so we saw a lot of people downloading data about police and community interactions. What you won't find, I mentioned you won't find the summary charts or tables of data. We do have some of that, but we don't have a lot. You won't find answers to questions that you really should probably ask Google, like what is the population of Detroit? We'll give you a data set that might help you answer that, but it would just be quicker if you asked Google. You also won't find information, identifiable information about any individuals or organizations. So if you're looking to do a deep dive on a particular business or maybe nonprofit organization, we're not going to give you the details that identify that organization necessarily. We take respondent confidentiality quite seriously, and so we remove any direct identifiers, and we often sort of coarsen the indirect identifiers to make sure that people can't be re-identified in the data that we distribute. You also won't find sort of the hard science kind of data. I mentioned we have brain scans, we have some genetics data, but it's always tied to a survey component or administrative data. There's always that human element to it. You're not going to find just pure engineering data, for example. And for the same reason that you won't find identifiable information about individuals, you won't find a lot of data to use in GIS or other mapping packages. People ask me that all the time. And one of the things that we take off in terms of disclosure is geographic, any kind of geographic detail, and that's exactly what you need to use GIS. So we're not the best place to start if that's what you're looking for. There are lots of places to get data across the internet. So what makes a place like ICPSR unique? I mentioned that we've been around for 60 years. It is our goal to make sure that the data that we make available are usable by people across that historical time period. So as grad students, you probably haven't really thought a whole lot about the technology changes in social sciences over the years, but we've moved from punch cards to reel-to-reel tapes to store data, to floppy disks, to compact disks for a hot second. And now everything is available directly downloadable onto your computer. So we make sure that the technological changes don't inhibit people from using the data. And we always make sure that we've got an archival version of the data that's useful in readable in statistical packages of the day. We also have pointers to data that are held elsewhere. So it doesn't make sense for us to spend a lot of time and effort curating the data that's available elsewhere, like, through the Census Bureau, or even like some of the Eurobarometers or Afrobarometer kind of surveys. Those are available other places, but we will link to them so that you can find them with your search in our catalog. We have both curated and self-published studies, and what we'll be talking about today is curated studies, and that's because they're much more standardized. And what I mean by curated data is that we've actually got a professional staff of about 30 people who, when we get data in, they look at it and they say, first they do a disclosure risk review, and then they look for, are there things in the data that they wouldn't expect to find, variables that aren't documented, or values that they wouldn't expect, things like that. They work with the data depositor or the principal investigator to make sure that we understand what's in the data and can create documentation so people can use it in the future. And then they also create files formatted for the main statistical packages. So that's why I'm going to kind of focus on the curated data today. It's also the engine that drives some of the tools that I'll show you. And then also we are the only ones that I know of that tie literature related to the data back to the data in as an extensive way as we do. So you're like, okay, stop talking to me. Just show me what you have and how to find it. Just a word about kind of how we're organized. You can think about ICPSR as a library, but a library for data. So just like a library has shelves of books and a catalog that you use to search, and then you get the description of the book or the article, and then you can say, I want this, and you end up with a book or whatever it is that a musical score, whatever it is that you're looking for. ICPSR is the same kind of thing. And so what I'm going to show you is kind of our website interface and the search tools to help you get to that data that you want. And I just want to mention that there's no right or wrong way to approach the catalog. Sometimes people think, well, I have to have a research question before I go to the ICPSR catalog. You can have a fully formed research question or research idea. That's great. You can come in with just a general interest in a particular topical area and see what we have. You might find a study that looks interesting in an area that you may not have been super aware that you were interested in before, and you look and see what other people have done, and you get an idea about how you might want to use the data. I know for me, I have a PhD in sociology. I love doing research, but coming up with research ideas is the hardest part. I can get interested in a whole lot of things. But if I start with a data set, that really helps me think about what is it that these data might be really good to study. So you can kind of think of it as a labyrinth. There's no right or wrong way. Wherever you enter, you'll get to something that hopefully will be beneficial to you, or you'll find out that maybe we don't have what you need. We try to make it as easy as possible to find what it is that you need. So there's always a search bar at the top of all the ICPSR pages. There's a Find Data tab that I've screenshotted here. And then there's an additional search bar on the Find Data page. All of those things search all of the same databases behind the scenes, so you can get to the results quicker. This is a screenshot of basic search results, and so I know that there are a number of you who are interested in things like K-12 education or counseling psychology, criminal justice, and so when I heard those things, I was like, oh, we'll look for data related to bullying, because it kind of crosses those different disciplines. And so that was the search that I did. And this is the screenshot of the search results that came up. You can use the filters on the left-hand side, and I've listed some of the ones that are the most useful. Probably the restriction type, particularly if you're looking for data to use for a paper, for a course, for example, as opposed to using it for your thesis or your dissertation, you probably want to focus on publicly available data, because you can download them as soon as you find it. You don't have to wait to get access. You might have a particular stat package that you want to use. You can restrict your search to the data that are in that particular format. Some of our data have online analysis tools. You don't even have to download the data. So if you're just looking for quick numbers to put in a paper without actually fully analyzing things, you can limit your search to the data that have those online analysis capabilities. I mentioned that we have about 19,000, between 19 and 20,000 studies. About 1,500 of them have that online analysis package. Not as many as I would like to see, but hopefully that number will continue to grow. You can also search by methodological things, like if you know that you need longitudinal data because you want to look at the effect of a program that somebody participated in later life outcomes. You can look specifically for data that are longitudinal. If you want to look for studies that are only in that curated collection, so they've been through that sort of quality review, they've got good documentation, use -open ICPSR in your search results, and that'll limit it to the curated studies. I have an arrow here in the middle because you can actually toggle this and you'll see the description of each of the studies that shows up in your search results without having to go out to that study page. Our default is to have it off because some of those descriptions are really, really long, but I find it helpful if I'm just looking for something to be able to read through the description as I go as well. And then you can sort them in a number of different ways. When you put a search in that search bar or the search bar at the top of the page, it's going to search a number of different things. So I've been talking a lot about studies. That's the first page that you get, and we'll dive into studies a little bit more in a minute. But I also, oops, I always forget my bouncing arrows. But I also mentioned that it searches information about what's in the data. So we call those variables. Some people call them the questions or the fields in the data set. But the key term that you put in, so in this case, I was looking for bullying, and it looks for that term in the variable name, the variable label, the question text, and the answer categories. So if it finds it in any of those places, it'll return that variable in this list. And so you can see that it's just a list of questions that are in a variety of data sets. If you, oh, there's the bouncing arrow again. If you click on one, it shows you the, and of course I picked a screenshot that I didn't look at closely, so there's no frequency distribution, but ordinarily you'd see how many people answered in a particular category. This at least shows you what categories there were. And it gives you the study at the top, so you could jump back out to that study. It also shows you on the left-hand side where that variable came in that particular study. So often there are questions that are similar to the one that you're interested in right around it in a survey questionnaire. And so you can find those using that, the boxes on the left-hand side. You can also choose a couple variables from that list in your search results and compare them. So this gives you the full variable label and question text when we have it. It gives you the frequency distribution. It tells you what study it's from and links you back to it. And it tells you who was asked this question. So if you're only interested in studying college students or only interested in studying 10th graders, for example, you can find questions that were asked of that group of people. Back to the search results, it also searches publications. This time I remembered the bouncing arrow. So here it's going to look for the term bullying in the title of an article, the title of a journal, maybe, if it's a word that might, if you put in a name, for example, that would appear in the authors. If we have the abstract, it also searches that, but it is not searching full text. It's only searching the information that we have in that citation about the particular article. But you can, here you can see that there's full text options. You can click on the DOI. It uses Northern Colorado's library privileges to allow you to get to those data. So you don't even have to jump out to the library's website to find it. You can find it directly from our bibliography, but it's using your resources behind the scenes. So this is just a hint sort of where you might want to start. So if you are thinking of collecting your own data and you want to come up with questions, or if you're teaching a class, I use the search and compare variables tool in class all the time. Sometimes to show students how people think, sometimes in a research methods class to teach something like operationalization or question ordering or things like that. If you have a particular publication that you like, you might want to start with the publications. Also, students find starting with the data-related publications database is a little bit more intuitive because it's closer to your typical library database. And all those options are in that drop-down from the Find Data tab. We have data grouped in what we call thematic collections or topical archives. And these are often funded by an external entity. But if you have a broad interest in a broad topical area, this might be a great place to start. So if you go to the Find Data tab in the thematic data collections, and then click down on the bottom on Explore Our Data Collections by Topic, you'll get a page that lists all of the different data collections. And then if you click on the links there, it'll take you directly to that page. This is a list of the different topical collections that we have. I kind of tried to group them sort of by a meta topic. And each one of these, again, is linked. So if you're interested in a particular area, you can just take the slides and jump out to that archive. I wanted to, oh, yeah, two things to say. I'll actually say this when I'm on the next slide. So I wanted to highlight the National Archive of Criminal Justice data, again, because Nicole mentioned that criminal justice is a strong grad program. I forgot to include the National Archive of Data on Arts and Culture. I meant to do that. It's my own archive. It's bad that I forgot, but we also have that. And then we have the Child and Family Data Archive for people who are interested in child development or K-12 education. There's lots of education data in there. We are also working on dividing up the sort of collection that's just the ICPSR studies, what we call our member-only data, so that it will have an education arm. So you'll be able to find education studies that way as well. That's still in the process. But if you do a search on one of these websites, like if I had done the search for bullying on the Child and Family Data Archive website, I would get a subset of the list that you saw at the beginning. It's only searching the studies that are held by or listed by that particular topical archive. And that's important because a lot of these archives are run by funders who have a say in what goes in the archive. Like the Criminal Justice Archive is the archive of record for the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institutes of Justice, and a couple other programs. So data collected with funding from those entities will be in there. Other data about crime may not be in there. The National Archive of Data on Arts and Culture is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. They get to pick about 5 data sets a year that go into that archive. So I know that we have data about libraries, for example, that are not in NADAC. They're in the larger ICPSR collection. So if you do a search on one of these topical archive homepages and you don't get as many results as you think you should, back out and do it on that on the main ICPSR page. Once you find something that looks promising, the result of that curation process is that you get lots and lots of information to help you decide whether those data are right for you. So this is I use the example of Monitoring the Future. This is a long-term ongoing study. They look at 8th and 10th graders and 12th graders. They're 2 separate surveys, the 8th and 10th and then 12th grade surveys. And this includes lots and lots of different kinds of questions about the substances that kids are using, questions about educational aspirations, obviously questions about bullying because it came up in that list. But when you click into a study, you're going to get a page that looks like this, that gives you information about that data collection effort. So you'll see the summary right at the top. And you can see that this summary is pretty long. And so if it were displayed in the search results list, it would take up some real estate there. It also gives you information about the methodology. So the study design, who's included, who's not, things like that. Those are all further down on that project description tab. You'll notice that we use a lot of tabs in our displays. You can also see what variables are in that data set. This is a tab that looks very much like the one from the search results, but this is limited only to the variables that are in this particular study. So you can search across studies, and you can see this one has multiple data sets. So there are at least 5 or more variables asking for respondent sex, depending which data set you're using. But you can search here, you can sort to make sure that if you have multiple concepts that you're interested in, you can make sure that they're all represented in the data. And then it also shows all the publications that we've found that are linked to that particular data set. And this is a little bit of a misrepresentation. We've only found 2. These are the newest Monitoring the Future data. There are lots and lots of citations related to all of the other Monitoring the Future surveys. So there will be more here as well, but you can see how other people have used the data. And if your luck is like mine, that's where you look at the list and kind of read through the titles and you're like, oh, they did the thing I want to do. But usually they have information at the end about what the next step should be. So you can follow up on the research that's noted there. And we do I should mention, we do have librarians who are making the association between the articles or the presentations or dissertations and the data set. They're making sure that the authors actually used the data and didn't just mention it in passing. So you're always going to find some research that's based on the data in that bibliography. We have a new feature on some of our studies called Explore Data. There's a button at the top. It gives you a glimpse of sort of what the data look like. This is helpful for students who don't know what underlying data look like. It's not super helpful in evaluating the data in terms of content. You only see the first 25 cases and 25 variables. But it gives people a sense of kind of what it looks like. You can also run frequencies and crosstabs on all of the variables through Explore Data. I mentioned about 1,500 of our studies also have online analysis capabilities. The one that I chose happens to be one of those. So if you click the online analysis or the Analyze Online button, you'll get another pop-up box that gives you two different options. If you're really just exploring the data and know that you're only going to be doing frequencies and crosstabs, I would use the modified SDA one. It's a cleaner interface. It's ADA compliant. You can drag and drop variable names. But if you want to actually do some analyses, you can click the full analysis capabilities, which is what I clicked. And this is the interface that you get for making a cross-tabulation table. You can see it looks like great 1980s computer programming. There is a newer interface. They keep telling me that we are transitioning to it. I'll believe it when I see it. But it's a clunky interface, but you can do just about anything you can do in traditional statistical software through this interface. So you can do multiple regression, logistic, probit, things like that. You can also use one study to find another. If you say you got to the Monitoring the Future study and you're like, yeah, this is kind of what I want, but not quite. You can look and see if there are other data sets related to that one. If they're in a series, that's at the top of each study homepage. Each study is also tagged with subject terms. So maybe you searched for, I don't know, drug use, but you didn't think, oh, what I really want is drug education. You can click that particular subject term box and it'll bring up all the other studies that have been tagged with that same subject term. And then also the items in the bibliography. This one I cheated and went back out to the bibliography for the series because we had only found 2 for this particular study. But you can see it lists all of the data that were used in that particular publication. So it's a great way to see what kinds of data might be combined or might look at similar topics. So you can take a look at those studies from there as well. Once you decide that you're really interested in the data, you can download the codebook without logging in. In this instance, it's at a study level file. Otherwise, you can click the download button next to each of the data sets and you'll get the codebook usually by the data set. This one happens to be a little bit different. But if you click that link, it'll download the codebook. And this is what our standardized codebook looks like. It gives you information about the study itself in most cases. This is usually provided by the data, the people who collected the data. And then it also gives you frequencies for all the variables that are in the data set. So this is just a plea from the codebooks themselves because they say, please read me. They don't like just collecting dust. It's amazing how many user support questions we get that could actually be answered if the person had looked at the codebook. So it's always a good idea to take a look at the codebook. If you're going to download the data, you can do it in one of 2 places. You can either download it with the button in the middle or on that data and documentation tab and go one data set at a time. The difference is If you use the download button in the middle, it'll give you all of the public use data in the stat package that you specify. If you know that you only want one of the data sets, go ahead and use the download arrow with that particular data set, and then you can choose your stat package and go. In order to download, you will have to create a Researcher Passport account, or if you already have one, you'll have to log in. It's quick and easy to set up those accounts. I think there's 3 questions. You will have to agree to terms of use. And because we all read them super carefully as we're going through on the way to download the data that we're excited to use to start our project, we give you a copy of the terms of use that you agree to when you download the data. So in your download package, you'll get a zipped file that includes a citation for the data. ICPSR is one of the leaders in trying to get people to cite data in the same way that they would any other resource that they use in writing a publication, for example. So we have at the top of each page, you can click Cite This Study, and it'll give you the citation. Further down on the At a Glance tab, there's a suggested citation. We give it to you in your download, and it's usually also in the codebook. So we try to make it as easy as possible to do the right thing and cite the data. It'll also give you a copy of all the information that was on that study homepage and the data that in your format and the codebook and any other documentation. So often data providers will give us information like the actual survey questionnaire or an interviewer guide. We'll make that available as well. Some data are restricted, and so you'll see a red bar across the right-hand side of the page if that is the case. If the data are restricted, there will be an Access Restricted Data button in the middle of the page. And when you click that, you'll get a modal box that pops up that tells you what kinds of things you're going to need to apply for those data. And then when you click Continue, it takes you right into the application. We often get questions about why data are restricted and what people need to do to get it. Why data tend to be restricted are either because when we did that disclosure risk review, we realized that there were some variables that are really crucial to the analytic utility of that particular study that we don't want to take the detail out of, but that they might pose a potential increase in disclosure risk. So we'll make the data restricted in that case. It may be that there are lots of open-ended questions, and we might have masked them all out of the public use data, and we make them available as restricted use. Sometimes the topics are really sensitive. Sometimes it's a combination of all 3. We've got data about sexual assaults in prisons. So you can guess there's information about the prison, the inmate, and the actual assault. So those are pretty highly restricted data. In order to get it, you'll have to fill out that application. That asks you for who's going to be working on the project, what your project idea is, why you need the restricted data. We don't let graduate students be principal investigators on restricted data projects. It's not because we don't trust you. It's just because in the restricted data use agreement that you sign, you also agree to destroy the data when you're finished, things like that. And it's usually easier for us to track down a faculty member. They tend to be a little bit less mobile than graduate students who go off and get a job somewhere and we don't know where they are. You will have to have a restricted data use agreement signed by somebody at Northern Colorado. That is usually somebody, like at Michigan, it's somebody who's in the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. So it's somebody who can legally bind the university to this particular agreement. You'll also need IRB approval or exemption to complete that application. And then the data come to you in one of 3 ways. If there's little additional disclosure risk, or the data aren't on particularly sensitive topics, you can get them through encrypted download. You'll get an email with a password and another email with a link, and you can download the data one time. You do have to fill out a data security plan if that's how you're going to use the data. Much of our restricted data is also in the virtual data enclave. So it's on our computers and you kind of remotely connect from your own computer. You do the work on our servers, and all of your files that you want to take out to produce your paper, for example, have to be looked at by somebody on the ICPSR staff to make sure that they meet the disclosure risk requirements, so that you don't have cell sizes with few cases, things like that. And then for data that are really, really sensitive, like the sexual assaults in prison, we have a physical data enclave in the basement of the ICPSR building. It's not a gray room anymore. They did paint the shores of Lake Michigan on the walls. So it's at least a little bit nice to be in there, but you can't take anything in with you. You can't take pictures of the data, things like that. I said that I would also talk about the summer program, and I realized that I am running short on time because I want to leave time for questions. But here again are lots and lots of links. The summer program is now structured so that there are 2 3-week sessions with an intersession in between a single week. The registration link is here. There's a webinar that gives an overview of this year's program. The link for scholarship opportunities is here. Unfortunately, that's closed for this summer, but definitely keep it in mind for a future summer. And we also encourage students to check with their department or their university because there's often funding that students get that way. And there's a YouTube channel that includes lots and lots of information, a day in the life of the summer program, all of the Blaylock lectures. There are usually lectures about 3 nights a week during the 3-week sessions. Those are all recorded and made available on the YouTube channel. And one of the things that people love about the summer program is the networking. So every summer we have about 1,000 participants from around the world. And people have made collaborations where they end up publishing with somebody that they first met in the summer program for their entire career. Oh, that's the scholarship page. Here's information about the dates of the program. I know that what comes to mind often is how much is it going to cost? So this is an example of that. We have short courses that are 3 to 5 days. Those are $1,600 to $1,800. They wouldn't fit on the on my screenshot here. But you can see because you're at Northern Colorado, you're a member institution, so your tuition is almost half of, or just over half of what it would be if you weren't at a member institution. And this is just an example of some of the courses that get offered. There's lots of methodological courses, but also substantive courses thrown in there as well. And there's a great guide that I've linked to that will help you think about what courses might be the best for you to take. Whether you're looking for foundational statistical training or you're looking to brush up on a specific technique, this will tell you how to kind of think about those courses. We also have guides geared at students, things like how to read a social science journal article. I'm sure your library has a LibGuide on this same kind of thing, but people find it in different places. We've got a slide deck on interpreting output using SPSS. If the Director of Instructional Resources would get on the ball, she would update these, and there will be one for, as the SPSS one will be updated, and there will also be one for Stata and R. And that person I'm picking on is myself, so I can pick on them. And then also an exercise to think about whether you need restricted data or there might be public use data that you could use to study your particular topic. And with that, this is just a list of ways that you can get in touch with ICPSR. You can sign up to be on our email list. We send out not very many emails, maybe a couple a month. The summer program also has its own email list, so you can sign up there. All of them are listed on the page that I've linked here. Here's a link to our YouTube channel. We've got our podcast, and we're on all of the usual suspects in terms of social media. And I've kind of listed those here. And I think that that is all I have. So we have a little bit of time for questions. I've also made sure to include my direct contact information, as well as the ICPSR help information. The phone number and the email will get you to our help desk, or Arun Mather is usually the one who persons that, and he is great about either answering your question or getting it to the right person who can answer it.